Hey everyone, what is up and welcome back to the Lifestyle Lifters Show, episode number 57, Eat Smarter, a nutrition guide for fat loss. This is going to be part one of a three-part series on nutrition, training, and just lifestyle and FAQs around actually losing body fat. It is that time of year where summer is coming around, people want to get leaner, feel confident with the top off, look good in their clothes, and obviously people wearing more shorts, more short sleeves. It is that time of year for us to want to look our absolute best. So that is why I'm going to structure this three-part podcast series around this. And today's topic is going to be all about nutrition 101 for dropping body fat. So to start out with nutrition, it really comes down to, okay, if you want to structure your diet, before we start talking about calories, before we start talking about macros, micros, supplements, mealtime, and any of these things, you have to talk about adherence. Can you see yourself following this diet for the rest of your life? And I've been victim of this before in the past. I use myself as my own best example. Previously, I would have tried the paleo diet, and paleo is basically it's just you're essentially just having anything that you can catch, anything that you can get or grow from the ground. There's absolutely no processed foods at all. So it'll be the likes of just lean meats, it'll be the likes of fruit, it'll be the likes of vegetables, nuts, etc., etc. I did try out paleo before in the past because I was following some influencers online and I was of the opinion that was the diet you had to follow in order to drop body fat. Needless to say, as a vulnerable 20-something-year-old, whenever a night out came and some alcohol was thrown in there, or maybe the odd piece of bread, etc., that paleo diet went out the absolute window, as did my adherence. So was I able to adhere to that long term? Absolutely not. But it doesn't just have to be, people just feel that structuring or following a diet and adherence, you have to follow a certain diet. Like I'm following a paleo diet, I'm following a Mediterranean diet, I am following a keto diet, whatever it might be. For some members, for instance, I had two clients, Ian and Tyga, come to mind in the past, and they weren't necessarily following any diet. It was just they were really, really strict Monday to Friday. So Monday through Friday, Tyga works as a teacher, and Ian was more office based. They would have a good routine in place. They'd get up around the same or similar time. They'd start work at the same or similar time, finish work at the same or similar time, and eat at the same or similar time. And the food that they were eating during the week, it was pretty much the same or similar foods. And they seemed to have like a nice structure there, a nice little routine with their nutrition. Was it restrictive? Somewhat, because they cut out the quote unquote the junk Monday through Friday. But then once Friday evening came slash Saturday morning, when they got out of their routine, their work routine, they had a bit more time on their hand. That is when their consistency and their adherence with the quote unquote the diet just completely changed. And it was almost a case that they felt the need to cheat in their diet. So for anyone out there that if you feel you need to cheat in your diet, why do you need to cheat in the first place? It can't be a very, very good diet. You shouldn't be off the mentality that you need to break from it the weekend. So what we actually recommended Ian and Ty to do were to just portion it out. You know, they both of them were lovers of chocolate, as is I'm sure most people listening. So instead of just waiting for the weekend to have that chocolate, where you're probably going to be more sensitive to it because you've cut it out for the last 6 or 7 days. Have some every day. Eat chocolate every day. That's literally the approach that we use with both of them. And in that way, once the weekend came, it actually curbed their sweet tooth. They didn't feel the need or urge to binge because it was just something that they were having consistently every single day. And if you were like Ian or Tiger, even me in the past, where you would have followed a restrictive diet, I would really question that approach. I would really question that approach. Find something you can adhere and sustain to long term. And for most people, that involves including foods that you enjoy, hitting a calorie and macronutrient breakdown and profile that's going to help you towards getting and reaching towards your goal, and just something that you can actually implement and sustain long term. All right. So sustainability adherence is key. Now, short term, it is okay to be aggressive, but I do not recommend it for the most part. Depending on your start point, maybe you don't have a whole lot of body fat to lose and you have a holiday coming up in 3 weeks. you could potentially be aggressive there and just go that bit harder in your calorie deficit. But just understand that the aftermath of that can often lead to a large increase in weight, essentially, because your calories have gone from really micro to all of a sudden macro, and you've just bumped them up notoriously. Okay. That is another thing that I should have mentioned as well. Have a goal in mind, but have a goal after the goal. I spoke with this before in a previous podcast. For instance, one member, he had a big goal of like looking his best for a wedding abroad last year, but just felt a small bit disheartened then afterwards that I'm not going to say there is the post blues. We actually planned for it in advance. We gave him some tips and guidance and just having something to aim for to actually look forward to afterwards. Because I fell victim before in my past, and I'm gone off a bit of a ramble here. This is on nutrition, but just a short one on this. It's really important. When I ran the marathon in 2018, that was everything I was training towards. That was everything I was aligning my nutrition towards. But I felt so lost the first week in November after the bank holiday weekend in October, because it was like I just didn't. You almost don't think of the aftermath. You don't think of like life still will go on. What's next after this? So set goals, but then have follow-on goals after those initial goals are met. And that is why, if you want to be aggressive short term, I want to look my best for my holiday, sure, you do you, but make sure you have some plan in place for after the holiday. Because otherwise, what's probably going to happen is you're going to look your best for the holiday. You're going to go 7 days where your body's like, whoa, I've gone from 1,400 calories a day to 4,000 calories a day. You're feeding me all these foods I'm not even used to. And you will return home from that holiday and you look at yourself in the mirror like, God, did this really happen in 7 days? And that can happen if you do not have an approach and strategy in place. So the first step in structuring your diet, it's all about adherence. Okay. And just going off the top of this as well, I kind of briefly alluded to it with Ian and Tyke. It is just getting out of the all or nothing mindset. Two members before come to mind, Shane and Megan, where when they were on the diet, they were freaking on the diet. Okay. They were following it step by step, eating really clean, eating really healthy. But then something would come up. And for both of them, it tended to be like maybe just an event, a night out, maybe a meal out with the family, or just kind of getting a bit fed up and pressing the effort button and essentially like ordering a takeaway, and then just eating a lot of junk food. But for both those individuals there, it was a case of like just being consistent for 2 or 3 weeks until something happened, and then just going in the opposite direction, going from a 10 to a 0 after just one action. And that's where a lot of people fall down as well, where they set these unrealistic standards for them when it comes to dropping body fat, that they need to be 10 out of 10 perfect. And when you don't meet those perfection guidelines and standards that you've set for yourself, you automatically assume that you've screwed up. You may as well keep going, and you just go in the opposite direction. And we've all heard the analogy, but it is true. If one of your tires went flat, you wouldn't just slash the other three. It's the exact same thing you're doing with your diet there when you think that you got to be 10 out of 10 perfect. So just what we recommended Shane and Megan. Megan lost weight even going to 2 weddings abroad. Shane had nights out as well, everything in between. But it's just, I would rather you be in 8 out of 10 consistently than a 10 out of 10 perfect for 2 weeks and then going from a 10 to a 0. All right. So first thing with nutrition 101 for fat loss, it is adherence. And I really like working with clients who they have a an audacious goal in mind, but they're not of the assumption, of the opinion that it's going to be achieved inside the next 2-3 weeks, whatever it might be. I'm not a good fit for those clients or for those individuals. Some coaches out there, they operate, and that is how they operate. What I would recommend you to do is just question, what do those clients have to do to get those before and afters? Is that something you want to do? Is that something you're willing to do? Also important to understand. All right. Step number 2. So once we understand the importance of adherence, it's calculating your calories and macros. Now, honestly, there's a lot of different calculators out there online, and that's exactly what they are. They are a calculator. So what I would recommend is just go with one and stick with that. I mean, probably the most common one is the Harris Benedict, if you want to check that out. Harris, Harris, Benedict, Benedict, the Harris Benedict formula. That could be potentially a good start point, but there's going to be such individual variance here. But it's very, very important that you just have an awareness of your current maintenance calories. And your maintenance calories are the number of calories you need to consume every single day to maintain your current body fat and body weight levels. All right. So the important thing here to understand is your maintenance calories, they change over time. And you will not know what your maintenance calories are until you start tracking your calories. That is important. So what I would recommend anyone listening is, God, I'm not really sure what my maintenance calories are. Just use the Harris Benedict formula and let's just say 2000 is coming up. Well, track your calories at 2000 calories a day for a full week and assess your weight. Has it changed at all? Has your body composition changed at all? After 2 weeks. If there's no change after, I would say 7 to 14 days, 14 days would be obviously a better metric there, then you're probably at your current maintenance calories. But if you have gained weight in, we'll say 7 to 14 days, you know that you're actually in a calorie surplus, and those maintenance calories, you might need to drop them from 2000 to say 1800. And on the flip side, if you have lost weight, assuming all things are equal, well, you're probably in a calorie deficit. So maybe your maintenance calories are, instead of 2000, they're 2200. Individual variance does apply. That is why you need some form of assessment to understand where your maintenance calories are at. And they do change over time. All right. For instance, when I did a cut for my photo shoot, my maintenance calories dropped from probably 33 to 2900 over the course of a couple of weeks. So I had to build those back up again after the dieting phase. And it took me about 12 weeks or so to reverse diet, where I got my maintenance calories from probably 29 to maybe 3200. At the moment now, with my current body weight, roughly 82 kilos, I'm probably at 32, 3300 maintenance. That is where I'm at again. But that just didn't just happen overnight. So as you lose weight, a lighter body generally burns less calories than a heavier body. So it's important that as you drop weight, as you drop body fat, which this is all about, that you adjust your calories accordingly. Because let's just say, for example, I'd use myself as my own example. 3300 was my maintenance, and my maintenance finished at 2900. And let's just say, for argument's sake, I said I dropped my calories by 10% from 33 to 3000. 3000 would be a calorie deficit for me when my maintenance calories were 3300. But if I stayed at 3000 for the full, we'll say 12 weeks, as my weight dropped, 3000 would actually be a calorie surplus when my maintenance calories decreased to 2900. So it's important that you adjust your calories over time as you lose body fat. Otherwise, you may not even be in a calorie deficit. Okay. Just then going on to calculating your calories and your macros. Once you have that all done, as I mentioned, it is all about the calorie deficit. And what I like to do with calorie deficit, depending on the clients that we work with, is it's more so percentage based rather than number based. Some people just say, reduce your calories by 500. Now, 500 is very context dependent. If I were to reduce my calories by 500 from 3300, 2800, it's quite a manageable calorie deficit. But if a female client started working with me and her maintenance calories at the moment, from where she was at, she estimated them were to be 1800. 500 calorie drop there. Okay, that is more than 25%. Whereas for me, it's the quick math. I don't know. It's probably, would that be 15%? So it's much, much less aggressive. So what I like to do with a calorie deficit is roughly 10 to 20%, depending on your start point. 10 to 20%, yeah, that's roughly like a nice little metric there. And again, depending on how fast you want to go as well. But I think, like we'll say on the less aggressive side, your maintenance calories are 2000. 10% calorie deficit would be going from 2000 to 1800. On the more aggressive side, a 20% calorie deficit would be going from 2000 to 1600. That would just depend on your time, on your adherence levels. What I generally like to do with our members is I actually like to start them off higher with their calories and then just slowly, systematically make the drop easier once they have a bit of a routine and structure in place. I find that actually works better than just going aggressive from the start, because if you cut somebody's calories really, really low from the start, again, depending on how much time you have, it can just get a bit rigorous and almost like not even enjoyable, where your energy levels are dropped, your performance in the gym is dropped, your mood is dropped, your energy is dropped. Whereas I find that most of our members, because they're working professionals, they're not full-time fitness gurus, they cannot dedicate, a huge chunk of time to just focus on this, that it's better to start them off relatively high with their calories, not go too aggressive with the calorie deficit. And then over time, as they build a routine, as they build a structure, to actually decrease them, because that way we just find it works and it's more sustainable. Now, in terms of also then, if you're wondering, should I cut or should I bulk? So if the goal is to lose fat, you need to drop some body fat there. And for probably 95% of people listening, you should absolutely cut before you consider a bulk. Okay. For example, one of our members, Simon, and he really wanted to build a lean muscle, but he probably had about 20 to 25% body fat, probably 20% body fat. And we could have maybe built him a bit of muscle there and bring him from potentially 20 to 22 to 25% body fat with more muscle. But then that would just make the process of cutting much, much harder. So what we've done with Simon instead was we started him out on a cut, okay? And he's at a point now where he's almost reached his desired body fat levels. And then once your body fat levels are low enough, you're in a much, much better position to actually do what we call a lean bulk, where you want to gain as much muscle as possible while minimizing the amount of fat that you gain. But if you're someone who already has a lot of body fat, it doesn't really make sense to focus on adding more muscle rather than reducing your body fat. Unless you're more advanced and this is something you've been doing for years and years, and you know yourself, you've an off season, you've an in season period, sure. But for 95% of our listeners here, you would be better off doing a cut as opposed to going for a bulk. I would just suggest. All right. A few other things here when it comes to fat loss. There is a difference between losing fat and losing weight. One of our members, Cullum, honestly, I would say the scale, it barely budged at all. Maybe over 12 weeks, I think he lost probably 1 to 2 kilos, which it's not much at all. Like 1 to 2 kilos over 12 weeks. You're averaging what? Would say 1 kilo every 6 weeks. To break that down, that'll be half a kilo every 3 weeks. You're averaging roughly 0.2 kilos per week of a drop, which is nothing really. Like, it's not a huge drop, to be fair. But even though he got a bit disheartened initially that his weight wasn't budging, I showed him his before and after. He's like, whoa, is that actually me there? Visible abs, much, much more definition, and just looking much, much leaner. All right. So it is absolutely possible for you to lose weight, or to not lose weight, but lose body fat, because your weight is your number on your scales. Body fat is the ratio of muscle to fat that you do have, which is why when it comes to tracking, I mentioned your calories, tracking your progress then, that is also important. And what we like to use in Mac Lifestyle Fitness is we like to use pictures and we like to use weight, okay? Some members, particularly our female clients, they like to use tape measurements also. While that is optional, not compulsory, but pictures and the weight are the two non-negotiables there. And pictures being the most important one. All right. So once we have our calories, now let's talk about our macros. And for your macros, you always start out with protein and you build it around that. Why is protein important? It helps you build lean muscle. It helps keep the muscle you currently have when you are dropping body fat. It'll help keep you fuller for longer. It'll help you recover faster in between sessions. Okay. So you always start out with your macros and look at your protein first. Now, in 1 gram of protein, there are 4 calories. So let's just say, for example, you're a guy and you're currently at 80 kilos. Okay. And we set a high protein diet for you where we say 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. That'll be 160 grams of protein. Okay, 160 grams of protein. Now, let's just hypothetically say that this guy He's at 2,000 calories in a calorie deficit. Okay. If we're eating 160 grams of protein, remember 1 gram is 4 calories. So in 160 grams, that'll be 640 calories. Okay. So you take those 640 calories of protein away from his 2,000, and this guy now, he's left with what? 1,340 calories. With those 1,340 calories, you can break them up then accordingly on, between your carbohydrates and your fats there. But you always start out with the protein. That is the most important one. Okay. Then how should you balance your carbohydrates and your fats? So I'll start out with your fats because fats are essential. Your body technically cannot function without them. And that is why you or cannot make these, your omega-3 or omega-6 healthy fatty acid self. So that is why you need to either supplement with them or get them from good source of food there. Okay. So in terms of how much fat you should eat, I would say at a minimum, whatever your body weight is in kilos, multiply that by 0.6. 0.6 to 1 gram per kilo. So on the low end, this guy, he's 80 kilos. If you multiply that by 0.6, that is 48 grams of fat a day. On the high end, 1 gram per kilo of body weight, that will be 80 grams of fat. So between 48 to 80 grams of fat. What you should know about fat is in 1 gram of fat, there are 9 calories. Okay. So in 80 grams of fat, that will be 720 calories, which, given his diet at the moment, that 640 are from protein. If you add 720 there from fats, that will give you what? Got it. Quick maths here. 1,360 calories from carbohydrates or from protein and from fats, which would mean the remaining 640 calories will come from your carbs. All right. I know that might sound a bit confusing there, but I'll just give you more guidelines and you can calculate this yourself. All right. So with the protein, 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight. I usually like, just for argument's sake, when someone's in a deficit, roughly their body weight in kilos times 2. Unless there is someone who was maybe, obese, those metrics you can go on the lower end. But for a lot of our members who are maybe at 15-20% body fat for guys, 20-25% body fat for girls, we usually like to recommend 2 times their body weight for protein. All right. For fat, so 0.6 to 1 grams, and then the remainder from carbohydrates. And technically, carbohydrates, they are not essential to survive. But if you want to thrive, if you want energy in your workouts, if you want to perform good, I would highly recommend that you lean more towards a higher protein and then higher carbohydrates in training days and scale them back on rest days, because carbohydrates will fuel your workouts. They will give you that energy that you need to push through the workouts, particularly when you are in a calorie deficit. So that is why I usually like to recommend a minimum of 3 grams of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight to maybe a maximum of 7. And again, that's all going to be individual dependent, but just we base our carbohydrates on activity levels. That is important. All right. Carbohydrates, they give you fuel, they give you energy. So on those days where your energy demands are higher, it's a hard leg session, it's a hard conditioning session, maybe it's a big upper body session, you might push your carbs that bit higher. On your rest day where you're just going for a long 45-minute walk, we can keep our carbs lower because your activity levels are not as high. That is important. Okay. So just quickly on the macronutrients there, you've calculated your calorie deficit. You know what number of calories you're using. Always start out with the protein. That's important. And then how you balance your carbohydrates and your fat, as I said, that's down to preference and also down to activity levels. Okay. But the protein would be the big one there. Now just source the protein. So as we know, that includes your lean meats. So the likes of your chicken, your turkey, your lean steak mince, fish, such an underrated one, like cod. Honestly, there's a reason why The Rock fricking eats it, even when he's doing a cut. Such little calories in white fish, cod in particular, and so much protein there. All right. I don't feel enough people are posting about this, but cod is a big one there. Other white fish like hake or pangasius, all very, very good there as well. Salmon as well. Salmon is fantastic. It's more of a fatty fish though, and it is higher in omega-3, omega-6. It wouldn't be as lean as cod, but still really, really good just for your brain function as well as everything else. Other source of protein then, so like snacks, we have Greek yogurt, 0% Greek yogurt, protein powder, very, very good options. Low fat cottage cheese or zero fat cottage cheese, and also egg whites as well. Egg whites, game changer. Such a good one there for you. In terms of healthy fats, so you'd be looking at your fish, which I already mentioned. You'd be looking at your nuts, you'd be looking at your seeds, the likes of your sesame seeds, your chia seeds, and so on. And then just your healthy oils, your sunflower oils, your coconut oils, and so on. All right. Finally, then when it comes to carbohydrates, so the type of carbohydrates you're eating when you're doing a cut, it is important. Really, really important. And optimally you want more of the slower digestion complex carbohydrates, particularly pre-workout. And if you want the quote unquote the faster digestion sugary carbohydrates, and you do have a sweet tooth, like Ian and Tycho I mentioned earlier, keep those towards your post-workout window. All right. For example, I do have a client, Morris, who, like us all, has a notorious sweet tooth. So I just told him, if you have that sweet tooth, and he's a guy who's quite active, he does some cardio, he does a lot of gym work, he does a nice combination of both. I told him to have that whatever that thing is you're craving. For him, I think it was a piece of chocolate. Have that after your workout, because after your workout, your body is like a sponge, and it will just absorb the sugar that bit better, and it will help you recover faster in between your sessions. Okay, but going back to your carbohydrates, the type of carbohydrates you eat, it is important. Okay, in general, particularly when you're in a calorie deficit, you want to be eating more of the slow digestion complex carbohydrates, which will keep you full for longer. Okay, so the likes of your oats, the likes of your sweet potatoes, very, very good options there. Boiled white potatoes, one of the most filling foods out there. For some reason, it gets a bad rap. Your rice and so on. Very, very good options there, and really important that you get enough of those complex carbohydrates in to fuel your workouts. Okay. Also, when it comes to, there's this misconception when it comes to just your type of food and your macro and your micronutrients, that you can just eat anything you want provided you're within your calories. And that, while that technically is true, that is called if it fits your macros. If you're someone and you're following a 2,000 calorie diet, and you're going to bed relatively hungry at that, or you're at least not full going to bed, do you really want to use 500 of those calories on a donut and still be hungry afterwards? Probably not the best choice. So the danger is in the dose of these, what we call these processed foods. Okay. And the deeper you go into your cut, the more strict you'd have to be with them, and the more you'd have to reduce them. Because if you start out at 2,000 and you finish at 1,600, even like 2 chocolate biscuits, depends on the type, that could be 300 calories there, which you might have been able to get away with at 2,000 calories, but just at 1,600 becomes a bit trickier. So just be careful for the most part on the type of food that you're eating, particularly when you're in a calorie deficit. And that is why, I had to have this conversation with one of our members this week, and he's doing a bit of a cut, and he absolutely has lost weight. But I had to just have a chat with him about the peanut butter, which is freaking lovely, and I absolutely love it too. But the thing was, he was eating tablespoons and tablespoons of it. And when we looked at the percentage of his calories from snacks versus meals, the percentage of calories from his snacks was actually around 25%. He's at around 2,000 calories a day at the moment. And around, Stephen, and around 500 of those calories were just from snacks. And it was the likes of like having 40 grams of dark chocolate a day, having 25 grams of peanut butter a day, having these like coconut balls. I was like, okay, look, I know they taste freaking amazing, but for you actually get more bang for your buck replacing those snack calories with the meal itself, and maybe just scaling back the dark chocolate to 20 grams instead of 40 grams, and a teaspoon instead of large tablespoons of peanut butter. So that just does become more important. The type of food that you're actually eating, the deeper you go into your cut. Okay. Now, so when it comes to fat loss, you spoke about calorie deficit, you spoke about the macronutrients. Then obviously micronutrients. This is going to be your vitamins and your minerals. And this is where fiber intake is also really, really important. Okay. I always say to our clients, my goal with you when you're losing weight is to eat as much food as possible while staying within your calorie deficit. And a good way of doing that is, first of all, having the high protein diet, which I spoke about. Secondly, eating lots of fiber. So fiber will come in the form of fruits and vegetables in particular. So that'll be the likes of your green leafy vegetables, the likes of your spinach and your kales, your cruciferous vegetables, the likes of your broccoli, your cauliflower, your cabbage, okay, the likes of carrots and so on. All of these, just vegetables in general, just load them in. Honestly, people, a lot of people are doing it wrong. You know, they're going to bed hungry, but then I'm looking at their meals and it's like, you haven't eaten any vegetables at all and your protein is really, really low. If you want to go to bed relatively full and satiated, have a high protein diet, include veggies at every meal outside of breakfast, and drink water. That is the final thing here in the macro and micronutrients. Water intake is important. Oftentimes we mistake being hungry with just being dehydrated. So whatever your weight is in kilos, just a rough guide would be multiply that by 40 to 50 milliliters, assuming you're not, you know, obese. For the majority of people, 40 to 50 milliliters is a good metric there. So for example, this guy who is 80 kilos times 4, that'll be 3.2, and times 5 to 4. So 3.2 to 4 liters of water a day. That could be potentially in the high end there, but for most people, I feel it's better to aim a bit higher with the water as opposed to aim a bit lower. Okay. And good ways to actually just get more water in is what I like to do is I like to front load my day with water. So I've already, as of recording this, I started this at 6:30 a.m. and I've already drank 1.5 liters. Okay, I have more water here beside me. I would drink more water during my workout. And probably by midday, I'll nearly have drank 1 gallon. Okay, but that's nearly my threshold then for the day. For the rest of the day, then I will just sip in water in small amounts and I'll really scale it back in the evening time because I don't like it happens nearly every night where I have to get up and go to the bathroom. Okay. So I just want to minimize that. And that's why I front load my day with water and then scale it back during the evening. Okay. So that is pretty much everything on nutrition guide for fat loss. Just to recap, we talk about adherence. We talk about calculating your calories and macros using the Harris-Benedict formula. Starting out with fat loss, use it doing a percentage base of your calories. So 10 to 20% calorie deficit. Then we look at your macros. So protein, high protein diet, roughly 2 grams per kilo body weight. Then balance your carbohydrates and your fats accordingly, depending on your activity with your carbs. We spoke about your micronutrients, getting fiber into you. If you are someone who's currently tracking with MyFitnessPal, look at your end of day and the daily recommendations of fiber for girls is roughly 28 grams and for guys about 40 grams. Okay. It's always okay to aim for the higher end there, but that should be a threshold. 28 grams of fiber for girls, 40 grams of fiber for guys. We then spoke about water intake. So 40 to 50 milliliters of water per kilo body weight. The last kind of two small things I want to touch on is just meal timing and supplements for fat loss. So when it comes to meal timing, I like to break it down into just two types of meals, post-workout meal and an anytime meal. And post-workout, depends on the type of activity you are doing, it is probably the best time for you to get carbohydrates, okay? Because let's just imagine your carbohydrates as like a battery. And we'll just say you start your workout with the battery relatively full. Maybe it was at 75%, and your carbohydrates come the end of the workout, they've dropped down now to 15%. You've emptied the tank almost to the bottom there. Okay, you want to refuel, repair, and restore those carbohydrate stores so you have enough energy to get back up and do the exact same thing tomorrow and the next day after that. Okay, so that is why carbohydrates post-workout, for most people, it does work well. It is when you're most receptive to your carbohydrates. Okay, some people might find, God, whenever I eat white potatoes, I just feel bloated. But if I have them after my workout, I don't get that sensation. That is why, because your body is like a sponge post-workout, depending on the activity, and it will just absorb those carbohydrates better. Just like what I mentioned with Morris there, he has a sweet tooth. And sometimes that sugar can go straight to the brain and straight to the head. But then other times you've probably noticed that, God, when I have a piece of chocolate after I work out, I don't seem to get that sugar spike that I do on a rest day or when I have it outside of my workout window. Okay. So post workout, if you were to partition your plate, I would say you want roughly 1/3 of it protein, potentially up to 1/3 or even more of it carbohydrates, and the remaining there just vegetables and some healthy fats. Okay, that will be a post-workout meal. Again, depending on activity, it might even be more carbohydrates and protein and less veggies. That is okay. Then an anytime meal. This is outside of a workout, or this is just on a rest day. If you were to partition out your plate again, I would say up to 1/2 veggies, more at least 1/4 to 1/3 protein, and the remainder carbohydrates and healthy fats. Okay, that will be a better and probably an alternative option on a rest day. Okay, so what that might look like would be, we'll say on an anytime meal, that could be chicken fillet stir fry, and you might just have a small portion of rice. Whereas in a post-workout meal, it could be the exact same chicken fillet stir fry, but a much, much larger portion of rice. Okay, so just meal timing, for most people, you don't really need to worry about it so much. I'd rather you just focus on your daily percentage of carbohydrates, protein, and fats and hitting your calories. But if you want to go kind of more detailed into this, what I would say is post-workout, have your carbohydrates, and first thing in the morning. They're the 2 times you're going to be most receptive to carbohydrates. And then anything outside of that, I would go more low carb and then high protein and high fiber. So let's just say, for example, you are someone who trains at 6 o'clock in the evening. Your breakfast could be overnight oats, where you have some carbs and you've got protein. Your lunch could be a salad with absolutely no carbs. Your pre-workout meal, that could be something like a protein shake and a piece of fruit there, which will give you some energy for the workout. Then you would do your workout, and your post-workout meal, that could be your biggest meal of the day. That could be, let's say, a chicken fillet stir fry with a lot of rice there, or sweet potatoes, and some chicken as your protein, and your veggies there thrown in as well. That could just be a rough guide there for you. But in general, if you want to really nail down your timing, carbohydrates first thing in the morning and post workout, for most people, it's when it is the most optimal time to have them. Okay. Finally, when it comes to supplements, this is like the icing on the cake, but the majority of our members who work with us at Mac Lifestyle Fitness, we always recommend them to get a protein powder supplement. Why? Because a lot of people, they just find it hard to reach their recommended daily, and their recommended daily allowance of protein there. So just having a scoop of protein on top of just convenience, it's just so easy, and it actually tastes really good. You can use it for cooking there as well. So you can use it in your overnight oats, you can use it in your porridge in the morning. But that is usually a staple for our clients we recommend. Now, I do have some clients who do not like it. One of our members, Frank, comes to mind. So what he likes to use instead is just use some of the protein yogurts if he can't get it in from, let's say, meats and eggs and egg whites and so on. But for the majority of our clients, we recommend getting a whey protein powder. And again, there's a lot of brands out there. I like to use the Optimum Nutrition Gold Standard ones. Those ones tend to work well for me. I did try out some ones before, and I just got I got some spots on my nose and on my back, so they just didn't agree with me. All right. And for someone out there, if you sometimes feel a bit bloated, taking whey protein, you could be somewhat lactose intolerant, and you might be better off swapping to a vegan protein. Sun Warrior is a vegan protein brand that I would recommend. I've no affiliation with any of these, by the way, but that is a good brand I would recommend if you are someone who doesn't digest the whey protein properly. Other supplements that I recommend, creatine, it is the most scientifically backed one there. Creatine for fat loss, creatine for muscle gain, absolutely would recommend going with that. And just get the creatine monohydrate unflavored. Okay, get it unflavored. And that way then you can even put it into your protein shake and drink them together after your workout. I usually recommend, it depends on some of our clients. I got a text off a former client, Peter, and he asked me about creatine and what brand I would recommend and when should he take it. So I just said, just get creatine monohydrate, and to take it post-workout, because he felt sometimes if he had a pre-workout, he felt a bit gassy. So again, individual variance here. You can actually take it any time of day, but I like to take mine post-workout. And then other supplements I'd recommend. So protein, creatine. I mean, look, if you're listening to this and you're living in Ireland or the UK, we are not blessed with sunshine, so vitamin D might be a good option there. Okay. And then finally, like, look, if you really want to get this done, I'm actually getting blood work done. Excited about this. Next week, I want to address any deficiencies that I have. Get some blood work done. You know, go to your doctor, get some blood work done. And look, without going on a rant about doctors, not, just like not every PT and coach is created equal, the same with freaking doctors too, without bad mouthing anyone in particular. But some doctors are like, you're grand. I'm not going to go into the detail of my blood work, but there was one or two things that came back that I wasn't happy with, and I wanted to adjust. And he goes, look, for the most part, you're a fit individual. You're more than enough to survive. But screw that. I don't want to survive. I want to thrive. I want to get the absolute best out of myself. So I've booked in a follow-on appointment with more of a specialist in this field who actually helps out a lot of kind of bodybuilders. Not that I'm a bodybuilder, but just gym goers and avid exercisers. And I want to get my blood work done with him because he has a better understanding of me, of my lifestyle, and how I want to just, push everything to my absolute potential. So if you feel you do have any deficiencies there, absolutely book a blood test and use those results as a baseline for addressing any deficiencies you might have. Okay. Finally, just when it comes to nutrition, 101 for fat loss. Okay. Lifestyle integration, making this part of your lifestyle. This all starts, so it's all good and well knowing about the calories, knowing about the macros. What are you going to do about it? What action are you going to take? And for the majority of our members, the action always starts with the weekly food shop. Okay. I call it out every week in our Sunday sermon where I give our clients a checklist. And the first thing on the checklist, it is always number one. Start out with the weekly food shop. Do most of your shopping in the outside aisles. If you notice with the layout of supermarkets, it's not just by chance. You walk into any supermarket, they always start you out with the fruits and the veggies. Why? Because it's essentially the behavior they want you to actually lean towards is, I'm going to put in some broccoli. I'm going to put in some apples. I'm going to put in some fruit here. You feel good about that, which means the deeper you go into the supermarket, psychologically, well, you know what? I've already got the fruits. I've already got the veggies. I think I deserve a treat. I'm going to go down the middle aisle and I'm going to get some biscuits. I'm going to get some cereal, etc., etc., etc. Okay. 2, combat that. Do the majority of your shopping in the outside aisles. Okay. You think of the outside aisles, shop the perimeters. That is where you're going to get your fruits, your veggies, your lean meats. Okay. That is where you're going to get the majority of the stuff that you'd actually need if you want to stick to the 80-20 principle. And then with the middle aisles, that's where we get more of the quote unquote the processed foods. Do the majority of your shopping in the outside aisles, and that is all about lifestyle integration. This is where this nutrition all starts. Secondly, then, when it comes to nutrition for fat loss, preparation. Planning preparation is key. You heard Sarah Butler on the podcast a few weeks ago. Once she has her weekly food shop, what she does is she plans out her meals Monday through Sunday on what she would like to buy every single day. If you're someone who wants to do the same, that is what I would recommend. What meals would I like to cook for this week? Make a list of them. You have that list, bring it with you with the shopping. And then do you decide then, do you want to meal prep? Do you want to cook in bulk? Okay. Some of our members, they like to do this. They like to cook on a Sunday, and that will do them until the next weekend. Other members, they would say, Connor, he comes to mind. He likes to cook and use today's dinner for tomorrow's lunch. Okay. And then some members, they like to do it bi-weekly, where Jamie comes to mind, one of our members. He will cook on Sunday for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then he'll cook on Wednesday for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But meal prepping, I will say, if you know what you're eating and your food is in your control, it's harder not to lose fat than to lose fat if you have that dialed in. Because if you're in control of your food, and when you're home and you're absolutely starving, you don't have to wait 45 minutes before you cook. You've got something there prepared for you. You're going to be in a much, much better position than someone out there, listen, who decides to eat only when they're hungry. Because if you eat only when you're hungry, you will make decisions out of emotion. And typically, when we make decisions out of emotion only, all right, those decisions we make do not always tend to be the best. But if you can actually break those bad habits by having something prepared in advance, it will just make the job much, much easier. All right. And just on this as well, environment is the silent killer for fat loss for many people. And we'll just talk about the food environment here. If a food is in your house, sooner or later, it will be eaten. Okay, if a food is in your house, sooner or later, it'll probably be eaten. Have you ever gone into the kitchen with no intention of eating any food and you saw the tray of biscuits open? And without even thinking, you just unconsciously grabbed one and ate one. Okay, that is why environment is so, so important. And what I recommend to our clients is you want to make it as easy as possible to eat more of those real helpful whole foods you want more of. So have vegetables in your environment, have fruit where you can actually see it in your environment. It's going to make it easier to make those right choices. Batch cook 15, or what I used to do is I would boil 15 eggs. I would store them in the fridge. I would have 3 every single day. Okay. It made it much easier for me that if I wanted something quick and easy to snack on, I would just have some boiled eggs there. Okay. Might have some with rice cakes or avocado as well. On the flip side, though, if your environment is not conductive to your goals, that it goes back to the weekly food shop. You're doing your weekly food shop and you know that granola, you know that chocolate peanuts are trigger foods for you. Yet knowing that you still buy them and you still stock them in the presses. When you're hungry, what are you going to reach for when you want something quick? All right. So the best way, know your triggers. And if you really want any of those foods that you crave, do not buy them in your weekly food shop. Increase the resistance to get them. Make yourself drive to the shop or walk to the shop to get them. Because often it's just delaying that gratification by 5 minutes. If you can stop just in that moment when you want to reach for it, if you can just take a deep breath, delay that gratification, there's a lot to be said for that and having the ability to do that. And you look at the traits of any successful dieter out there who's in it for the long term. It is having that discipline sometimes, which you need, which people don't always talk about, that you're not making that decision based on emotion. You're making a decision on the future you, the future self, the 2.0 version of yourself that you will be proud of. All right. So make sure your environment is conductive to your goals. And if there are any trigger foods, just sometimes I know myself, granola is a weakness of mine, and I just don't bring it into the house anymore. That being said, even if it is in now, I'm just in a much, much better position that I don't feel or need the urge to actually have any. But before I wasn't able to do that. And sometimes you might need a bit of tough love with your nutrition. You hear about Alcohol Anonymous, and we'll just use that analogy. For some people on that, or naturally with anyone on that, they don't just say, we might just have alcohol on Friday and Saturday, and we will then scale it back for the rest of the week. No, they just say, we cut it out, we go cold turkey from the start. And you might need to do that with some of those trigger foods, which, promote binge eating for you. And the easiest way to do that is not bring them in the house in the first place. And that if you do ever want them, make yourself go to the shop or the supermarket or the bakery to get them. All right. So I want to wrap it up there. Hopefully you got a lot of value out of this. Nutrition 101 for fat loss. So we spoke about adherence, calculating your maintenance calories using the Harris Benedict, being in a percentage-based calorie deficit, roughly 10 to 20% of that. Okay, looking at your macronutrients, so protein, 2 grams per kilo of body weight, carbohydrates and fats, balance those out accordingly depending on activity and just depending on your preference. We spoke about micronutrients, 28 grams of fiber for girls, 40 grams of fiber for guys. We spoke about hydration, 40 to 50 mils per kilo of body weight. We then spoke about meal timing, carbohydrate timing in particular, that your body is most receptive to carbohydrates in general, first thing in the morning and post-workout. Use that accordingly. We spoke about supplements, about protein, about vitamin D, about creatine, about getting your blood work done if you want to find out a bit more about this. And finally, we mentioned about lifestyle integration, all starting with your weekly food shop, knowing what food you're going to eat, what food you're going to cook, doing some form of batch cooking, and then not bringing in any of the foods which trigger binge eating for you. That is really, really important. And it's a simple and systematic way to actually lose fat and keep it off long term. If you did find this podcast helpful, I would really appreciate, while you were listening now, if you could leave a 5-star review. I do not run ads. I do not put money behind this at all. All this growth that have come in the podcast, we're 57 episodes in at this stage, has come from listeners like you just spreading the good word. So I would appreciate if you left a 5-star review. And if you do want anything more laid out, I have some freebies here for you, which I'll post in the show notes. So these freebies include, if you want access to a Live and Lean recipe cookbook, which, going off this episode, might be a good idea for some people to know what are actually some of the foods and the type of foods that I could be eating, which are going to help me with my meal prep. I'll post a link for the Live and Lean recipe cookbook in the show notes. Or if you want something more systematic with your training, which next week we will talk about that, I will post a free 3-day total body training program in the show notes. All you need to do is request access to it and I will grant you permission. All right. That is all for this week's episode number 57 of the Lifestyle Lifters Show, Eat Smarter and Nutrition Guide for Fat Loss. Hopefully you found this helpful, and catch you guys next week. And we will be doing a deep dive 101 into training for fat loss.